Gary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Jenelle. I appreciate being here.
Recently, I did an episode with another guy and we were talking about like men's emotions. And I know you and I will talk a lot about men's mental health and gambling and addiction. And I feel like there's not a lot of men out in the like social media world that like speak about these things other than like the big guys like Ed Milet, Tony Robbins, like that kind of thing. But it's nice that everyday men are also talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's still a battle that, a lot of guys have been going through hundreds of years of conditioning of keeping this stuff to themselves. And Ed Milet's a very big influence on my life that you mentioned him. And, it's even, for guys like him, I think it takes a certain level of success to be comfortable and confident enough to speak out. And, I think there's certainly times in my life and my career where I was successful, but not successful enough that I didn't fear that, other people talking about me would have caused me a detriment to that career. So you start to keep it inside. That becomes the normal habit for you. And I think that's why we don't see that many men at the moment talking about it, even though there is a lot of guys struggling. It's just that years and years of social conditioning through generations and generations. My dad and my dad's dad would never talk about this stuff. And I do believe that there is a line. I mean, I don't think we want all our men out there, crying every day because things aren't going well. We do have to work hard and muscle up and all of those things we've been told. But there is a flip side to that. And that is, we do struggle. And when we do, we've got to be man enough to speak up about it.
Do you think that it takes other men talking about it to make other men feel comfortable speaking up? Or do you think that's on us as women to create a safer space?
I'm not entirely sure that it's a women's problem. There is that element. I don't know, certainly from my own personal experience, whether my fear was that I'd be judged different by women. It was probably more the male circles that I was in. But somebody said once to me something that I thought was quite profound, and I've certainly found my experience. Being vulnerable gives other people permission to be vulnerable. And I was very scared the first time I told my story to somebody I didn't know until their eyes lit up and looked at me and said, that's exactly how I feel. And it was from that moment that I realized that it actually is true. The more I tell people, the more I talk to people, the more they open up to me. I think it is about finding people, finding men, finding women. I don't think this is just a man's issue, but in my space, it is. It's finding men that you resonate with, that you have a relatable story to, and really listen to them. And you can find that, most people are going through something, and sharing your story can very well be helping somebody else through what they're going through.
I find the relationships with my friends that are the strongest are the ones that they know I don't have it all together. The ones that think I have a picture perfect life, that's the most surface level friendship. And I don't care for those friendships. But the moment that I show the cracks in the outer appearance, that's when you develop a little bit of a deeper connection with the people that you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's where the substance comes from, the depth and, basically for everybody else, if it's a surface level relationship, it's an Instagram friendship, really, even though it might be in person. If you're not sharing who you are, then, you're not being true to that relationship. And look, I know I lost a lot of friends through my time, some of them through good reason, others because people, certainly men, get scared when other men start sharing their story as well. And, it's not surprising though, because, when I started to share my story, I had friends that were very fearful that their own vulnerabilities were about to be exposed. And as men, we cover up our vulnerabilities, we cover up our mistakes, and we find excuses for them quite often. This is probably true the world over, that when a man presents to his mates and says, hey, I'm struggling with something, the very next line out of their mate's mouth is, you'll be right, mate. Let's go and grab a beer. And that's typically because your friend doesn't want his vulnerabilities exposed either. He fears that the more we talk about this, the more I'm going to have to actually do some digging in my own life.
And
And
God
that's a
forbid.
scary, yeah, that's a scary place for everybody to be. Nobody wants to be responsible for their own pain. And so we try to avoid it at all costs. And that creates a further cycle of keeping things to yourself. But I will say that the friends that I've got now, they're built on honesty, they're built on trust, and they're built on non-judgment and mutual respect. And, they're not as many as they were before, but they are far, far better than they were.
Quality over quantity.
Absolutely. And to be
And
honest, I
as
don't
you
have
get older,
time.
your friendship gets smaller. Friendship
Yeah,
grows.
I don't have time for people that really about that, And look, I went through some tough times, and that is when you're going to find out who your real friends are. I made a few mistakes. I made some mistakes in my own life, but I certainly made some mistakes in believing some people were more friends than they were. That's okay. I actually look back on it now with gratitude because it saved me 50 years of a fake friendship. So, there's always positives to downsides in our life.
Mhm. Now, the career that you had for years, you had a really cool job. It's quick to say you're an ex-cop, but it's way bigger than that. You were part of the federal police that helped run the prime minister's office in Australia, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I spent 18 years with the Australian Federal Police, and it was a fantastic job, a fantastic place. For me, I experienced a lot of things that kids that grew up where I grew up didn't get that chance. And I was fortunate enough that part of that career was doing close protection. So I ran our Prime Minister's protection detail for a couple of years. I had a couple of different stints there. Also, I had the pleasure of, working with a lot of important people from around the world and traveling to some great places as well. And yeah, it always seems interesting to me when I have conversations about my job because, to me, it was what I did. It was my work. I got up and I went to work every day like everybody else does. And it's probably not until I've left that I realized that it's not a normal job and that people that do get excited about, talking about some of the things that, that I happen to go through. But yeah, to me, it was just a job. I really enjoyed it. It was exciting, fast paced. It shooted me down to the ground. But it's only since I've left that I've realized that it might not be your normal 9 to 5 that I think it is.
No, not at all. It's one of those jobs that you feel like only happens on TV shows and movies, but I mean, someone has to do the
Yeah,
job.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and sometimes I enjoy watching those movies and TV shows and picking them apart. Other times, I enjoy watching them because it's similar to some of the things that I've done, and that makes me get excited that somebody's written a movie that looks like what I might have done in real life. That seems a bit odd to
Seems
me.
glamorous.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, well, it's not. It certainly wasn't that glamorous. I can tell you that.
No, God, no. I mean, but from the outside looking in, great job, pays well, really like prestigious almost. Sure, great family, great life, lots of friends. But with all of that, you've said that you were battling a very silent battle.
That's right. Look, I think this is a really large problem across the world, especially these days with the impact of social media and the desire to impress externally. And you're absolutely right. I had a fantastic career. I was earning very good money. I was traveling the world. I had a great family, a great friendship base, a house. I could go on holidays wherever I wanted. But for 10 years, I had depression. I had a major depressive disorder. And for the lion's share of that 10 years, I kept it to myself. To be honest, for a lot of that 10 years, I probably masked it even from myself. I would tell myself, the next time I get on a plane for 14 hours and I can turn my phone off, I'll just have a rest and I'll be okay. The next holiday I get to, I just need to wind down. I'll be fine. When I get that next promotion, I'll be able to relax a little bit and I'll be okay. All of those stories that are very common in my line of work, to be honest, that what I do now is talking to men and women who feel exactly the same, that once I get to the holiday, once I get a break, I'll be okay. They seem to be masking that even from themselves. And, for me, yeah, it was 10 years and it was 10 years facing the depression, but it was also a gambling addiction that my escape became gambling. And I know there's others that escape to drugs and alcohol, risky behaviors. Some escape to laziness and food, shopping. There's a whole bunch of things that we escape to. And yeah, for me, mine was gambling. And, over a 10-year period, it cost me almost everything I had. And, including having me contemplate taking my own life at one stage. And it was a rough time to be hugging your children and not want to be anywhere near, that hug is a horrendous feeling. To try and fail, or to try and quit gambling and fail at that a number of times over 10 years starts to get you to believe that it's never going to happen. And eventually you get to that point where you start thinking, well, I've really only got one more option to go if this doesn't work. And I'm very grateful that at that time I was man enough to go and see somebody. And 5, 6 years later, I'm completely different. And, in some ways grateful for the experience that I had.
There's so many avenues I can go. The first
Take
thing I
anyone
want
you want. Take
Yeah.
anyone you want.
The first one I wanna ask you is, how do you think in your experience, how do you think depression begins?
I think when it starts, we don't know when it starts. As in, from my experience, we then go through a period where we know it's happening, but we can't say it out loud. And then eventually you might get to a point where you can say it out loud and can finally do something about it. And that I think for everybody is going to be different lengths of time and maybe different circumstances that bring it to a head. And for me, there was some issues at work that brought mine to a head. That still didn't stop my problems. I still had another year of craziness after that. But I don't know how popular this belief is, but again, from my experience, I think in a lot of occasions, depression is a learned behavior. I do think it starts from something negative, that we have a negative impression, a negative feeling, but it's also something that becomes part of your identity, part of your story. And then we start looking for more evidence to prove that that story is correct. And whilst I don't dispute that depression has a chemical imbalance in the body and in the brain, I do think that at any point in my story, had I decided to change it 2 years earlier, 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier, even without knowing, I mean, the difficult part is for, 4, 5, 6, 8 years, I didn't even know myself, or I was masking it from myself. But at any stage in that time, had I decided to change behavior, change my mindset, my attitude, my story, the end result would be completely different. What I hope to do now with my work is to try and get hold of people far earlier, if not before they even realize that I call it pre-diagnosis. Before you say out loud, maybe you just start having those rumblings. But yeah, when it starts, I don't like to put a time on it. I've been to a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselors, and there's been a lot of stress in my life. A lot of people talk about my nan dying in 2007, and look, that seemed to be a reasonable point to point at, to say that this is, my gambling got worse from there, my depression got worse from there. But, I had a job where I was working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, traveling all over the world, on call all the time. I was often the last line of defense, not just in the Prime Minister's team, but, in the Commissioner's office, person that everybody calls. I was going through a divorce. There could be trying to pinpoint which of those things was the reason. To me, is quite pointless. We could spend years doing it, still not gets the right answer. But for me, it was more about what do I do next? Not how did I get here? What can I do from now? And no matter where you are in that spectrum, what you do next is more important than what you did yesterday. And that's what I struggled with for a long time. It was still about how I got here, not how do I get out. And, when we start saying things like, well, I'll be okay when I get to the holiday, that's all about giving into an excuse, not accepting the issues, not doing something. You're actually
You're
waiting for something
procrastinating
to
it.
happen. Yeah, you're waiting for something to happen. And, nothing happens if you don't do it. And even the holiday is not going to help unless you do something on the holiday to help.
It's almost like people are waiting to get to the next thing that's gonna numb them even more. Because when they get to the holiday, come on, they're gonna be drinking and partying the entire time. They're not gonna sit there and think about what's going on. Come on.
Absolutely. And look, you won't meet a person that hasn't said, I can't wait to this holiday. And then 2 weeks after the holiday's finished, will say, I don't even feel like I've had a holiday.
I
Uh,
need a holiday from the holiday.
yeah. And that's because they don't do the work on the holiday. And look, everyone's entitled to their holidays and rest. I'm not telling people not to have rest, but we do this with every aspect of our life. That next thing will bring me my happiness again. What's the next thing that's going to bring me money? What's the next thing that's going to bring me, whatever it happens to be? And those things rarely, if ever, bring you the joy that you desire. we keep looking for them. We keep getting told that the next car will be the thing, the next house will be the thing, the next holiday will be the thing, the next job, the next relationship. That's never the thing. The only thing is you. And the difficult thing is, people would have been saying this when I was going through my troubles, and I didn't believe it then. I believe it now because I've lived it. And, that's the difficult part. People don't want to believe it because it is far easier to wait for the holiday than it is to get up half an hour earlier and do gratitude and mindfulness and stretching and exercise and eating healthy. That comes with its own level of pain that people aren't prepared to go through.
We kind of like being the victim though, no?
Being the victim's easy. It's very
Very
easy.
easy.
You don't have to do anything if you're the victim. And look, even I said this about depression. Depression is easy.
Mhm.
You know, people might hate me saying that. It's not pleasant. I'm not saying it's pleasant,
Mhm.
but it's very easy because if I've got depression, I've got a built-in excuse. All of my goals and dreams, if I don't hit,
Mhm.
it's because of
You already
depression.
have the scapegoat.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a very scary place to be, to say, you know what, wherever I get to next is all on me. If I get there or if I don't get there, that's all
Mm.
on me. And it's not something that we like to do as humans. We don't want to be responsible for our pain. We don't want to examine our life, because when I realized at 40 that I was a product of every action and every decision that I'd taken, it's not a very nice place to be. It really hurts to think that you made choices and actions that weren't somebody else's fault. I could have at any stage, if I wanted to blame my work because it was so busy, I could have left at any stage. I didn't have to join. I could have said no to long hours. I could have said no to working as soon as I get home from overseas. Maybe at the time I didn't feel like I could, but I could have. And therefore, because I didn't say no, what happened after that is all on me. The great thing about that, though, is where I get to next is
Mhm.
also as a result of everything I do now, except I know it now, and I can make positive choices for where I'll be in 6 weeks, in 6 months, and in 6 years' time.
It's kind of scary knowing that we have that much control.
Yeah,
That we
it's,
are
it,
the creator of our own realities. I don't know if people are ready to believe that.
and they don't want to believe it. As we said, it's a lot
A lot of
easier.
work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot easier to be the victim, because if it fails, you do have someone to blame or something to blame. It's always the ex's fault. My ex did this to me.
Of
Well,
course.
you chose them in the first place. Now, you might have chosen them on false pretenses, and they might have been, but that's on them. That's not on you. But you made choices in that relationship. You made choices to stay. You make choices to stay in your job. You make choices to view what happens to you, in any way that you decide. And for a year after I went through the worst of my times, I was still bitter and angry. And here I am 5 years later. And I like to qualify what I'm about to say by saying I'm not proud or happy of everything I've done. But, I say that, I lost $2 million gambling. I lost my career, my reputation. I very nearly took my own life. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, it could have been the
Would you
worst thing,
consider that rock bottom? Like, what part of all of that was rock bottom for you?
but that's a
A
That's a good
loaded question.
no, we can go down another rabbit hole in rock bottom. I don't think rock bottom exists. I think it's the term that we use that gives us a reason to bounce back, and I'm okay to use the term. I think it's a socially acceptable term for I'm in a slump, because every time I thought I was at rock bottom, I went further.
Yeah.
Even when I was at my worst, it could have got worse. So I don't know that the rock bottom exists unless we are no longer here. Without life, there's no hope. Wherever there's life, there's still hope. And I don't believe that realistic rock bottom exists in our lives. I think we put a term to it and a name to it because it does give us an option to bounce back from. It does give us a hard bar that we can push and say, that's the bottom. I'm never going below that point. And for that reason, I do use the term. I suppose for me, that was my rock bottom. Could it have got better and worse? Absolutely. Thankfully, it didn't. But at my rock bottom, at my worst, I didn't want to be there. I wish I didn't have to be there. I wish I didn't put everybody else through what I put them through. But I can either today sit here and still moan about the fact that I did all those things that I'm not proud of, or I can be grateful for the lessons that it taught me, and the fact that I'm still sitting here, the fact that I get to work with a lot of people around the world and helping them overcome their own problems. And There are people still sitting here today because I've had the opportunity to work with them, and I can't be too angry at that. I've got to be grateful for that process, and that really rules my life these days. It makes a huge difference to be able to be grateful for the shit in your life.
I mean, I think Brene Brown said this, the glory is in your story.
Yeah, we all got to go through things, and we can either use them to destroy our lives further or better our lives. It's not easy when you're right in the middle of the storm, but there comes a point later on where you get a chance to look back and think about how that shaped who you've become today.
You said an interesting thing on one of your other podcast interviews. You said, I've smoked a cigarette. I didn't become addicted to cigarettes. I've been shopping. I didn't become addicted to shopping. So for you, what was it about gambling that became a quick addiction?
It worked.
Meaning?
That's so my main addiction was to escape in my own journey. And look, I do find this quite similar across the stories that I talk to or work with. I talk about the ego, the excuse, and the escape. And for 10 years, I tried to fix a gambling problem. But as crazy as it sounds, gambling wasn't my problem. I was gambling to escape initially my depression. And that again gave me another excuse that, I was using depression as my excuse for gambling. But ultimately, it was my own ego that was the problem. I was getting in my own way. I wasn't able to see my own vulnerability. I wasn't able to speak up. I wasn't able to own my identity. I wasn't even able to articulate who I was as a person. And because I wasn't able to do that, I became depressed or stayed depressed. And because I was depressed, I needed to escape. I did that into gambling. I had my first bet when I was 8 years old, probably younger than that, but I remember gambling on my own at 8. I remember I had a cigarette when I was 8. I had my first cigarette when I was 8. I don't smoke. I had my first sip of beer, probably younger than 8, sitting on dad's lap, drink the froth off his beer, probably younger than 8. I
Of course.
rarely drink. I'm not a drinker. Yeah, my mum took me shopping. I'm not a shopaholic. So I don't believe that necessarily early exposure is a big driver in where we end up with our addictions. I do believe that our activities around certain times of our life provide us a feeling. So for me, there were times that gambling provided me an escape. I was probably much older when that happened. It probably provided me excitement when I was younger. But so too did sneaking a cigarette, and so too did playing sport, and so too did other things. I think often we look at these things in isolation and say, because I gambled at 8, I was kind of prone to be a gambling addict.
And
But
you
I did a lot of,
hate that view of things.
yeah, and it also takes away everything else I did when I was 8. I like it. We can't
I
look
punched
at,
a kid. I'm not going to be violent for the
yeah,
rest of my life.
exactly. Like I like action movies, and I did when I was 8, and I like playing fighting games. I don't fight anybody. I think it's more things that happen at particular points in our lives that, look, we could probably spend 20 years and find out the exact point. But by that time, you're 20 years further down a bad path.
And nothing's
And
changed.
nothing has changed. And it's very easy to look at something in isolation and say, this is why you started. But unless you look at the whole narrative about what was going on or what you did in your life, you can't very well say that one thing started because you did it when you were 8, if you're not prepared to admit that everything else in your life would have started because you did it when you were 8. Does it have an influence? I'm sure it does. I'm not suggesting it doesn't have an influence, but I think for me, it was more, I found a tool that allowed me to escape from my own vulnerability. And that tool for me was gambling. Music would work sometimes and exercise would work sometimes, but gambling worked every time. And so ultimately that became my go-to escape. And, it just got worse and worse. The longer it went, the more escaping I needed to have. And by that time, a gambling addiction had been started. They all started to feed themselves. I was more depressed, and, it gets into this big cycle after cycle after cycle. And, again, at any stage in that process, I could have stopped it if I was prepared to be uncomfortable. And I wasn't, I certainly didn't have the wherewithal to make a conscious decision to do that and work at it. But in hindsight, I just wasn't prepared to be uncomfortable enough. It wasn't a conscious choice necessarily, or I didn't feel it was a conscious choice, but Yeah, that's all change comes down to, your ability to be uncomfortable. No matter what you are suffering or struggling with, a system and a process can help, but you've got to be uncomfortable. If you're prepared for that, you can do anything.
Yeah, amen to that. You said something interesting. You said, I feel like the depression kind of started because I didn't really know who I was. I couldn't express myself. I didn't really know my identity. Do you feel like how you grew up or society like made you want to hide who you were, or you just didn't know how to express yourself?
No, I think, strangely enough, if I hadn't bothered to sit down and figure out who I was, I would have probably got very close to the person I was. I think most people's issue isn't that they don't know who they are, it's that they don't articulate who they are. And so they never sit down and actually say, this is who Gary Fahey is as a person. These are my values. This is what I want in life. This is the reasons why. This is the process that I'm going to take to get there. These are the things I've done in my past, and I can accept those things. We don't go through that work, that, what are my values? Who am I as a person? And in the absence of a conscious creation of who you are, we become a victim of circumstance, and we become a victim of conditioning. We become a victim of Instagram, and we start thinking that everything people are saying about us must be true. And so then we take on that persona. Maybe that's who I'm supposed to be. I'll do that. Maybe that's who I'm supposed to be. I'll do that. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to buy. I'll buy that. Instead of, this is who Gary is. This is what Gary stands for. This is what Gary wants. This is the reasons why he wants them. Now I can go out and get them. And if you tell me that I want a Maserati, I can tell you, I don't want it. You can put up as many photos as you want. And I'll say, that's a nice looking car, but I want a Ford pickup. That's on my vision board, right? Like that. I don't want a Maserati. I give two shits about a Maserati. They look nice, but that's not me. And now I know who I am. It doesn't matter to me what people say. It matters a little bit, my family and that sort of stuff. I take advice, but it doesn't matter what pictures come up on Instagram. As I said, I think the issue for a lot of people where they get internal struggles isn't that they don't know, it's they don't articulate. They don't sit down on the weekend. They don't take their week holiday to really work on who they are as a person. They don't work with a coach or a mentor to go through what their values are, what they want to achieve, the process to get there. Most people aren't probably too far away from who they want to be as a person. But in the absence of creating that consciously, you will end up falling victim to every bit of noise that comes in from the outside.
Why do you think we're so afraid to just be who we are? Why do we want to be
But
like everyone else?
in case we get it wrong, and we fear being judged for our choices. I mean, if everybody else is driving a Maserati, people might think I'm some lowbrow hick in a pickup truck, right? So therefore I need to
Maybe
be
I am a
great.
lowbrow hick.
I'm probably am, to be honest.
Me too,
Um,
probably.
and there's nothing wrong with that. If that's who you are, be that. You're better off being who you are. It's a lot easier. I can't remember who said it, but be yourself. Everybody else is taken.
Yeah.
Uh, it's, and because it's difficult, because when we start to own our identity, we also have to start to own our mistakes. We have to own our problems. We have to own where we are in life. But, on the flip side of that, it comes with a level of serenity as well. I work with some people, and strangely enough, when we actually do this process, they have more than enough in their life to actually achieve what they want. And when they get that realization, they're like, I can't believe I was trying to get a new promotion. I thought I needed more money. I thought I needed more this. Everybody wants more money. And then I ask them what for, and they're like, more money. I don't know. A house. Okay. What house do you want?
They
Find the
have
house
no
you want.
idea.
They got no idea. Find the house you want. Figure out how much it is. Realistically, I mean, I'd love the $400 million house, but realistically, Gary doesn't need a $400 million house.
I don't want
Um,
that.
yeah, what house do you want? How much does it cost? How do you get that? Do you need a loan? How much do you need to earn to get that loan? Most people, a lot of people do earn that money.
Yeah.
Are you a person, are your values more around being at the kids' soccer or ice hockey on the weekend? Well, then don't take a job that makes 80 hours, it's 80 hours a week and you don't get home for weekends, and then bullshit yourself by saying, I'm doing it to make money for my family. If time with your family is important, then spend time. Get a
Yeah.
$50,000 a year job, move out to the sticks where it's cheaper, spend every weekend with your kids. If that's who you are as a person, it's going to be far happier than $10 million, not where you are. But the
Mhm.
reason we don't do it, it's hard. It's difficult. You've got to make choices. You've got to do something,
Mhm.
right? Most people don't want to do something.
That guy you're describing, he's gonna end up with the $10 million, but no family.
100%. That was me.
So that you
That was
said that
me.
was you? Well,
Yeah. Yeah. Look at, look, I gambled $2 million, right? Like, yeah, it's a truckload of money when you're on a government salary. I was earning good
load of
money,
money.
but I don't know what I was looking for, but I lost my family, going through that. I got divorced and separated because I was chasing a version of success that I hadn't described,
And you didn't
right?
even know
Just,
if you want it.
no, that's right. And look, if I'd sat down, I probably would have stayed and probably would have done the same things, but I would have been doing them with a different mindset. I would have been doing them knowing exactly what I was doing. I could have talked to my friends and family about this is the sacrifices that we need to make. Are we prepared to make these sacrifices as a family? Are we prepared to go through this process? I might have stayed. I'm not telling people to leave their jobs because you might be in the job that's for you, but without articulating who it is that you are and what you want, you will never know, which means we always have this divide in our gut that says, well, maybe I want something else. And then we start looking around and, again, I do work with a lot of guys that, become that middle age, 35, 40, 45, and women as well. But all of a sudden we're buying sports cars. Maybe that's what I wanted. We're starting to cheat on our partner or at least looking at other people because to make it again, not my responsibility, but just do the work to figure out who you are before you worry about what you want next. Because you might spend your whole life climbing the ladder only to get to the top and realize you had it against the wrong wall. When you're at the bottom, figure out what wall you want to climb and then, have at it. Get after that with all your might, but just do it consciously. Just
Yeah,
find the place you want to go and go there.
I get that. What, type of gambling was it? Poker?
No, horses.
Really?
Horses. Yeah, horses. I mean, horses
That's
drop.
some high class gambling.
I don't know about that. You
I
haven't been
thought
to
you
race
liked to
tracks.
drive pickup trucks. What the hell? Some white
No,
collar shit.
yeah, you haven't been to racetracks in Australia, but look, gambling's a little easier down here than it is certainly in the US. I'm not so sure about Canada, but yeah, it probably is a lot easier now. But we got all the bookmakers are online. There's races every day. We can bet on American races early in the morning, all the way through to English races late at night, and so it was easy and accessible for me. When I wanted to escape and I was sitting at home, it was there. I didn't have to drive to the pub or the club to play poker machines.
Right.
Which are quite prevalent here as well. With there everywhere, poker machines in Australia. But look, I played poker machines for a while. I don't really play poker. I play cards, but not that was never an issue for me. But really, yeah, it was horse racing, that style of gambling. I grew up around all forms of gambling, but I like horses. I like horse racing. I like the sport. In fact, just on Monday, I was out at one of the racetracks talking to a group of jockeys about some of my story. And, I still do some things with racing. My dad works at the races. I'm probably the anti-addict, or former addict. I don't have any issues with gambling at all. I can go on the track. I don't identify as a person with an addiction.
Mhm.
So when I talk about horse racing, I don't have any triggers. I don't feel like I want to go betting. So I think I've been very fortunate in the process that I've developed. I've really removed that element from my identity. But yeah, it was horses. It was really based around that escapism when I needed to, or
Mhm.
varying amounts from $1 to thousands of dollars in one hit. Yeah, it's
When did your family realize this was an issue? Like your ex-wife, kids, that kind of thing?
yeah. So I first went to get help for gambling in about 2007, 2008, and I told my parents and I told my wife then. My later in life, it was a different partner, but I told my wife and my parents then. I stopped gambling. I've said to a few people, I was successful at quitting gambling 4 times. Most of my
That's your
most of my two
trademark.
million dollars, yeah, most of the $2 million I lost after I quit gambling the first time.
God.
So look, a lot of addicts will know that, or a lot of people who go through those problems will know that, they return to it quite often. And again, my view is that that's because I was focusing on fixing the gambling, not focusing on fixing the problems that were leading me to gambling. But so they knew in 2007, 8, and look, when you're an addict of any sort, or when you're hiding things, you're very good at lying. And so when I went back to gambling, I kept that from a lot of people for a long time. And then I went and got help again, or I stopped. I think the second time I just stopped and I told people again, those close to me. I had declared it at my work every time because I had to get a top secret clearance. And I declared every 5 years that I was having trouble with gambling with my
What
clearances.
do you
And
mean you have to clear it at work? What does that mean?
so because of the work that I was doing, we had to get a top secret clearance so we could access information that, that government has access to, that it's not public knowledge, I suppose.
So
And so
what kinds of things are you declaring, like addictions or money or like what's happening?
it's the money that you do have, it's your bank accounts, your social networks. If you turn up and say, well, I'm friends with this drug dealer and that bikie group, and, that's probably going to be a little bit difficult. Foreign countries as well, as you've got contacts with, foreign nations, certainly that are non-friendly nations, they want to know about that. They delve into your life quite a bit, depending on what level of clearance that you end up getting. So I was always honest with those processes too. My understanding is the process isn't to kick you out if you have a problem. It's to make sure that if you have one, it's not a secret. Secrets are the biggest problem, not the problem, I suppose.
What makes you want to be honest about these things?
Uh,
And if you're
I,
gambling and lying about it, then all of a sudden you're still telling your employer about it.
yeah, I suppose you have a level of trust that they're not going to go telling the world about it. I
Yeah, I
certainly
guess
didn't.
so.
I didn't experience that the last time around. There was a few people that knew a bit more about my story than I would have cared. But yeah, look, I would still like to believe that I was primarily a man of integrity. I made a lot of mistakes and told lies around my gambling to family, but I didn't have anything to hide in terms of who I was dealing with and what I was, doing for my career, for my job. And I didn't want to create that problem. That wasn't the person that, again, sort of getting back to story and identity. That's not the person that I believed I was. But I was also confident in the process that telling people in our security area that it wasn't supposed to be told to my boss and my friends. And, I wanted to do the right thing. I suppose it was probably what I told myself, that I'm doing the right thing without, doing the right thing. So
Stories we
yeah,
tell
so
ourselves.
yeah, exactly. That was my version, and that got me through, and it made me feel okay too that I was telling people, that I wasn't hiding it from everybody. And then yeah, so my family knew a long way, a lot of times through that. I think a lot more people knew more things than they actually said. I'm sure, and especially a lot of my friends were male. I'm pretty sure that there was a few of them that knew some things were going on, and they weren't prepared to ask me about them. I had a few people ask me how I was, and when the conversation started, I would get that arm around you. Oh, you'll be right. Just wait until you've got that holiday coming up. You'll be fine. Let's go for a beer. I got that quite a few times. And look, that served my purpose as well. I wasn't in a place that I was willing to talk about it. So I just shut up and accepted that. But there was definitely people along the way that would have, in hindsight, would look back and say, well, we knew something was going on that he was struggling with. And then
Then how?
ultimately,
Like, where are the cracks in the shield?
I think that we all give off tells, certainly as we become distant, we change behavior over time. If it was you that your behavior had changed, I don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation with you. So I will tell myself that it's just because Janelle's going through a rough time. She's been up late. It's Christmas, so it's the end of the year. It's been a long year. So she'll be okay. And then I might throw out if you need anything, Janelle, just let me know. Right. And then I
And
feel
and
like,
then we pat ourselves on the back.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
there for them.
I feel like that I've done my duty in
Mhm.
being there too, because I'm
Checkbox.
trying it up. Right? Yeah, that's right. And then you also go through this process where you're like, shit, I hope Gary doesn't ask me about my problems because I don't feel like I'm ready to tell anybody. And then I throw out let me know if you need any help. You don't take it because you're like, all right, hopefully it'll go away now. So we both have this sort of understanding that we've both played our part. You might say to me, yeah, look, I've felt a bit rough, but I'm going okay now. Right. And then you feel like you've kind of exposed yourself enough. And so we keep playing this dance all the way through. And, I lived in people's pockets for a long period of time. Certainly my boss, the commissioner, and I, we traveled 54 times in the first year he was in office. We're sitting on
Wow.
planes, we're sitting in cars, we're talking all the time. And the way he asked me how I was towards the last couple of months was different to the way he asked me 12 months earlier. And I believe, I don't know, because he hasn't spoken to me since I got in trouble at work, but I believe that something inside him told him that all was not quite right. and he just wasn't able to figure out what or what to do with it. In his defense, I was in exactly the same boat. I knew something was wrong and I didn't know what it was or what to do about it. And so we just tried to avoid it and let's just move on and
And
hope
you're
that it
doing a
will.
weird dance.
Yeah, yeah. We were doing this weird dance for, probably a month or two. And then, then I got in trouble. I misused the works credit card. I got in trouble. I never heard from him again. And I went on my own journey to do the work that was needed to get to where I am today.
What do you think people's misconceptions are about gambling and gambling addictions?
Look, in particular to do with gambling or behavioral addictions themselves, I think people's misconception is that it's a choice. And that I have to qualify that because I actually do believe it's a choice, except that it's not a choice that is yet conscious in the person's brain. They have such an ingrained learned behavior. And we do know that there are very similar responses to trying to give up drugs and alcohol or substance types addictions. I certainly confronted in my friends and family when I told them that I was struggling with a gambling addiction, I would be told, "Oh, that's okay, just stop." And those types of comments, it doesn't matter if it's a shopping addiction, a sex addiction, food addiction. If it's a behavioral type addiction, typically the first response from people is, "Oh, well, you can just stop there. It's a choice, that it's a choice." And as I said, it becomes a choice, but it's a learned process. It becomes very subconscious. I followed a story of a guy who was a high profile footballer here that used a lot of cocaine. And his story, he was telling it that all day he would say to himself, "Don't take cocaine, don't take cocaine, don't take cocaine." And the next morning he would have woken up having taken cocaine. And there is that element of autonomy about the process that once you get so far into the addiction, the process becomes automatic. We know that 95% of the things that we do every day are a repeat of the things that we've done yesterday or the day
Of course.
before or in life, right? So that becomes one of those. Our body just gets up and goes through that process. It takes a lot of effort and work and failing to move on from that. But probably the biggest misconception is that any behavioral addiction can just be stopped because you decided you were going to stop. We'd all like to think that. I thought that 4 times. And look where I ended up. It wasn't until I did the work and for a long period of time, it took me 9 months before I realized, I was doing some work for 9 months and then I thought I had an epiphany moment on one day. And it was only just this year I looked back and I said, no, I actually did this work for 9 straight months before I woke up and went, that's it, let's move on. And just to follow on from that too, though, I think the other difficult thing is probably for people that are suffering the addiction is that, my partner at the time was also going through their own trauma to do with what I was struggling with. Now, ultimately, I broke trust that we couldn't get past, and that's okay. But I think you both are going through the journey at different stages. So when I was getting better and when I hadn't gambled for a while, but I might have stuffed up in telling a lie about some money from 6 months ago, I would still get a little bit of wrath from all that hate and all that trauma that had been drug up. My partner was only just at the start of experiencing the trauma. I would start to think, well, give me some credit. I've gone 2 weeks without having a bet, and I would want some favor from them. They're at a different stage of the trauma. And I think that if you are going through those struggles, getting some individual coaching, mentoring, and also together can help because, you know, my partner shouldn't have had to just accept that I was getting better and therefore everything is now rosy. They have to go through a process as well. And it hurts. It hurt me that I was doing so well and still being yelled at. You start to think, well, what's the point? I might as well go gamble again. But that's not the case.
Because she hasn't been on the same journey as you.
That's
The
right. You
same
have to go on
timeline.
the different journey. You have to go on an individual journey, but you also have to go on a journey together. And we unfortunately weren't able to do that. As I said, I've broken too much trust to do with my gambling and it was too hurtful. And that's going to happen as well. And, at some stage, everybody has to pay the piper. And if that's what's best for the scenario, sometimes it happens. Again, I can cry about it. I'm very disappointed that I hurt people that badly. But those actions also shaped the next part of where I went as well. So, I was sad and there's a lot that I lost from that relationship, but that's what had to happen. And that's the way it goes.
Mm. You bring up a topic that I want to talk about. You said you did the work. So you said over the last 5 years that you've basically built and developed a system that saved not only your life, but created a true life of abundance and also is helping many others. So, what is the first step of this work you speak of? And what has the last 5 years looked like? Because obviously, you're not addicted to gambling anymore. You're
Yeah.
remarried, correct?
Yeah, I got a partner. Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes.
got another partner that is everything's going well. So, obviously, the last 5 years of your life look very different. So,
Yes.
tell me about it.
Well, the first step is you have to do something.
Yeah.
You, you can't do nothing. I talk about being brutally honest with yourself. You have to find a way to begin to ask yourself, and not only ask yourself the hard questions, but give yourself the hard answers. Hard questions with easy answers don't get you anywhere either. So you have to find a way, even to start, just trying to explore some of those questions and answers. You will still lie to yourself at the start, but accept that and ask again. And then keep asking until you keep moving down the process. Ed Milet talks about keeping promises to yourself and building self-confidence and building self-respect. And I started with that process. I work in health and fitness as well. And I talk about people get to the 1st of January and they say, right, I'm going to lose 10 kilos. I'm going to give up smoking. I'm going to give up drinking. But they forget that for the last 5 years, they've broken that promise to themselves. The story that I told myself for 10 years was that I'll quit gambling. And I never did. So anytime I said I was going to quit gambling, my subconscious just laughed at me and went, yeah, all right, we'll see how long this lasts. Because I'd build up a process and I'd build up a habit of breaking promises to myself, all promises. If I said I'd work out at 6 and I went at 7, that was a promise that I broke. I might have convinced myself that it was still good because I went to the gym, but I told myself one thing and I did something different. The problem that a lot of people face is they take on this monumental task without any belief that they can keep a promise to themselves, let alone a big one. What we tend to do is we put it out on Instagram and tell the world and hope that that public shame is going to convince us to keep going. It doesn't. You'll get to day 3 and you'll forget your shoes. You'll get to day 7 and they'll be having a party at work. So you pat yourself on the back and say, well, I deserve a bit of cake. We have to start keeping little promises to ourselves. And I'll tell you, the very first thing that I did on my process, I got up 15 minutes earlier every day for a week. That was it. I didn't try and stop gambling. I didn't try and help people. I didn't try and do 50 different things. I heard Joe Dispenza talk about not hitting snooze on your alarm. And I never hit snooze on my alarm. So that wasn't something that I could do. It's something I now coach. Thank you, Dr. Joe. I coach everybody through, don't hit snooze for a week. If you hit snooze, that's the first thing you should do. Don't hit snooze for a week. And keep that promise before you actually create a new promise. So mine was get up 15 minutes earlier. I didn't do anything with that 15 minutes. It was just harder. I had to get up early. Once I did that for a week or 10 days, then I started adding things to that 15 minutes. I did a gratitude journal every day until that became my new habit. And I kept that promise every day. Then I started drinking 500 mils of water. Then I had to get up half hour earlier because I was starting to run out of time in my 15 minutes. Then I would have a cold shower, and whatever I built that morning routine one by one out of promises. And eventually 9 months later, probably about 6 months later, I started to feel really different about gambling. It wasn't that I enjoyed it before, but I really started to notice that this isn't who I am. This isn't what I'm about. I was still doing it, but it just felt different. And then one day, July 19, 2018, I just said, that's it. I'm done. I had what I call my brutal honest moment. I broke down at my nan's grave and told myself all the bad things that I've ever done and who I was as a person, what I hurt people, and I got it all out. I just said, that's it. I don't feel it anymore. And I have gambled since, but it's all in my control, like one bet. And that was it, like for a big race or, something here and there. Like I'm not going to pretend to people that I've gone 4,680 days without gambling, but that's not my identity. I'm not a gambler. I don't count the days because I'm not a gambler. Couldn't tell you how many days it's been since I've had a bet. It's been a long time, but if I've had one, it's been one, and it had no emotional attachment to me. That's not who I am as a person. And that was built by keeping promises to myself, to the point that It's a process that I do. I coach it. I call it the 4 play. It's 4 weeks of keeping promises to yourself before you even start any journey.
Mm.
That's how I would do it.
How long were you doing the work on yourself before you realized, like, I can probably help others?
Oh dear, I don't really know. I think I was doing it all. I might have even been helping others before um, I got to the realization that I'd help myself. Mostly because when I left the police, I've got a background in health science and fitness training, and so I opened a little gym, and so I was helping people with their health and fitness. And it would have been about 12 months after I went through my own transformation, I suppose, that I started helping people with their mental health, their mental strength, or specifically with their mental health and their mental strength. But for 2, 3 years, I've been helping people do that in the health and fitness space, whether it was weight loss, whether it was trying to get more energy back, whether it was, trying to build strength, endurance, whatever the case may be. Strangely enough, the process is exactly the same. Or everybody that comes in that's overweight has failed at keeping promises to themselves for a number of years. Process was the same. Start by not hitting snooze. Everybody that's overweight hits snooze. Sure, you might be the one that doesn't, but everybody that's overweight hits snooze because they don't want to start the day. It's just something that seems to be inbuilt with people that they hit snooze. You are subconsciously telling yourself that you do not want to get up and get after your day, which flows on into the rest of your day. So I'd start there and just say, look, just don't hit snooze for a week. And we start finding people changing their mindset, their mental health. When they did that, you will make more positive choices for yourself. So I didn't have to coach them in nutrition because once they were on top of their mental health and their exercise, they would naturally choose better food. We all know how to work out. We all know what to do with our money. We all know what to do to get a good education. It's the doing it that's the problem. And so it's building that skill, the skill of doing it, not the skill of achieving it that counts.
So, talk to me about some of your successes with your clients.
I originally started working with people that had hit rock bottom, I suppose, or their version of rock bottom. And
You're
what they're
like,
still,
don't tell me you're rock bottom.
don't tell me about your rock bottom. It doesn't exist.
Don't give a shit.
Uh, yeah, that's right. And, look, I suppose as crass as it sounds, I don't care. How you got here is irrelevant. It really is what you do next that counts. And action indicates your intention. Words don't indicate any intention whatsoever. Your actions, if you tell people you want to lose 10 kilos, but you're still eating cake, you don't want to lose 10 kilos more than you want to eat cake. That is as simple as it can get. If you want to get ahead at work, but you're not prepared to stay back or to do the jobs that nobody else will do, then you do not want to get ahead at work as much as you want an easy life. That's okay. Right? There's nothing wrong with that. Just stop telling people that you want to get ahead at work. Right? Own who you are as a person. Often they will come with a presenting problem. So they're a little bit overweight. They're starting to drink too much. They're making risky investments. They've started cheating on their partner, or at least considering cheating on their partner. And they don't want to be that, but they just don't know why. They've tried to avoid it. They've stopped and started. And then we start the process. And some part of it is, I work mostly with already successful people, or people that the external world would deem to be successful. High performance athletes, executives, business owners, that type of genre, or anybody that's successful in their life, great parents, great educator, teacher, that sort of stuff. So feels like they have a level of success, but isn't happy, that they're not fulfilled. There is some part of their life that just doesn't feel right, even though they've got all these things they thought they wanted. And the first part is to go through the fact that accept that this is a process. This isn't 6 weeks. This isn't next month. You may well be doing this for a year before you realize that you've made a change. But when you look back, you will realize that you've made a massive change. It's very incremental. It's something that you don't realize is happening until it's already happened. I talk about my journey. I made a promise that, so I did the getting up early, all my morning routines. Even at that point, that was when I started to consider taking my own life, because I was still gambling, even though I was doing all these good things, right? And I'm like, this is not going to stop. I can't stop this. And I thought the only way to stop this is to leave here. Everybody would be better off. That's typically the thought that most people have. And so I went to the doctor and I said to myself, whatever the doctor tells me to do, I will do. And he sent me to a psychiatrist. And I said the same thing. Whatever the psychiatrist tells me to do, I will do. The psychologist, the same thing. Gambling, counseling, the same thing. Whatever they tell me, I will do. I was still gambling for 9 months while doing all of those things, feeling like this isn't working. I'm still failing. It's not going anywhere. I was doing my morning routines. I was doing all this shit that seemingly didn't have any result to it. I was still gambling. That was the thing I was trying to stop. And then, as I said, one day I just went, that's it. And I look back, and it wasn't until I read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, where he talks about casting votes for the person you wanted to be. I was talking about signaling. I was signaling to myself this person. But it wasn't until earlier this year, as I'm writing my book, I'm like, hang on a minute. I was casting votes for 9 months towards this person. And I'm still casting votes today towards the next version of me. And that's the success that I have with people. I don't work with everybody. People don't like my brutal honesty style. If you're making mistakes, you're going to get told. This is not somebody else's problem. I am going to find out a way that it is your problem and that it is your fault and that it is your responsibility. And not a lot of people are ready for that yet. But those that are, accept that it's a process, and they go from no money to big careers, to owning their own businesses where they had nothing before. I've had suicidal people that I didn't know at the time, but have written to me and spoken to me saying that I'm only here because of the work that we did together. Whatever financial success that I've created for anybody, somebody still being on this earth because of work that we've done is the greatest success that I will ever have. We now work with athletes, you now work with executives, because this isn't just a process that takes you from rock bottom or out of rock bottom. If you're right on the edge of greatness and there's just something short in your game, if you're 98% there, 9 times out of 10, the missing piece is that identity, that owning who you are as a person, that knowing with 100% certainty that that is the place that you need to be. And I was talking to somebody about this on Monday. When I was in the police and I was on the Prime Minister's team, when I was running his team and standing on his shoulder, the rest of the world might have been collapsing around me. I was 100% certain of what I was supposed to do in that role at that time, if anything should happen. It might have still went wrong. I'm not suggesting that it would have always went right, but there was no doubt in my mind what I was doing. And I was very good at that job. And if you're on the edge of where you want to be and you can somehow harness your identity and create a 100% conviction in that is your place, you'll be amazed at how much that 2% difference is going to make. And you will go from good to great. I'm a performance guy. My whole life has been about succeeding and being in the limelight, being in high performance and high pressure. And I love that stuff. So seeing somebody go from someone that's already good go to the next level is fantastic as well. So it's often the same process, no matter if you're at rock bottom or just on the edge of greatness. People that are good don't want to think they've got to do the same stuff that people who are at rock bottom need to do.
That's the same process.
The same process. It's just the rock bottom is going to go a bit higher, but if you're good, you're going to go a bit higher too, right? But your bit higher is going to be magical.
I agree. Couple last questions for you. So
Go for
one,
it.
to tie into that, everyone listening right now is going to be very inspired by your story. What your life looked like a decade ago is like black and white to today, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like what you're saying is a lot of us are on the edge of like the person that we want to be. We do so much work, and the moment we're almost there, we give it all up. So you gave a great tip, a great practical tip of stop pressing snooze, like get up. That's my worst habit is snoozing. And like, as you were saying that, I'm like, I'm triggered. I have a lot of great qualities, but that one is my worst. So on top of that practical tip, what's one other practical tip that people can be doing today to bring them from good to great?
If you don't do it already, create a gratitude practice. I have studied a number of highly, highly successful people. There is not one of those people that doesn't have a gratitude practice. And as bluntly as I can put it, you are not the one that's going to succeed without one. So if you don't already have one, look, if you are on the edge of greatness, you probably do. I would encourage people that have a gratitude practice to handwrite their gratitudes. There is something that is transferred between brain and hand that seems to make it stick a little bit more. I would encourage you to add a reason why you are grateful for the thing, whether it's one, two, or three, or however many you do. I do three typically. If I'm struggling a bit, I will always do one, but I try and do three. And I always attach a reason why I am grateful for that thing. It just really cements it in you that you are grateful for it. And thirdly, every morning that I do a gratitude, I make sure I include something negative that I am grateful for. I am always trying to find some gratitude from my shit, something that is bad. How can I be grateful for something that is bad in my life? Because if you are grateful for the shit in your life, everything else is going to be a hell of a lot easier.
Gary, you've given us a lot today. And I had no worries that you would. I've listened to your other podcast interviews, so I was never worried about that. But it always warms me to know that so many people go through so much shit. And then once they get over that hump and get through that madness, they're just such giving people that they want to show others the light, that they want to help others through their darkest times. So, the question I have for you, what do you want from the audience? Like, what can they do for you today?
Well, look, they can certainly come and visit me at garyfahey.com. They can spread the word. I've got my Instagram is, I think it's Gary Fahey, but it comes up as strong.men's. My business is strong men's, MEND. So they can certainly support there. I put a lot of stuff out for free. You know, you're right. A lot of people do go through struggles and then want to give back. I think Fyodor Dostoevsky says, I only fear not being worthy of my suffering. And I started to say to people that my pain has to be worth something. And to me, it wasn't good enough to just be okay. And I've also got a book out, Externally Bulletproof, Internally Brittle. So it was, it's based on
Mm.
my life, part of the language. The first half is how the fuck did I get here? And it's the story of how it felt to go through depression, gambling addiction. And, I also encourage people, if you've got any struggles in your life, you'll be able to find some part of your story in it. There's not a person I work with that their struggle doesn't in some way resonate with somebody else's. So the first half was how the fuck did I get here? And the second half was how the fuck did I get out? It is literally a step-by-step process that I took, that I coached. I don't keep secrets, but people can do it themselves. It took me 12 years to do it myself. I can help people do it in 12 weeks. But if you want to do it yourself, it is all in my book. You can pick up my book and go through the process yourself. But check out the webpage. Come and visit me on Instagram. Say good day. Send me a message. I answer all messages that I get.
Gary, thank you so much for being such an inspiration for everyone today. I can't wait to read your book. I feel like there's still so much more to learn in there than I even got today. Yeah, just thank you.
Thanks, Jenelle. I appreciate you having me on, and also too the stories that you do tell. That the fact that everybody does go through struggles in life, and those struggles are big to them. Everybody goes through big struggles, and comparatively, they might not seem it, but your struggles are big because they're yours, and I'm grateful that you have a program that also allows people that have been through struggles or going through ups and downs. It's great that there's people like you out there that are making sure everybody knows that just because you're down doesn't mean you won't be up pretty soon.
Amen. Thank you.